The asteroid belt was a desolate graveyard of worlds, a place where the sun was a distant, unforgiving orb. Dust storms raged, sweeping across the barren landscape like angry ghosts. In the midst of this desolate expanse, a lone figure emerged from the shadows, his silhouette cast long and eerie by the drifting light. He was a drifter, a wanderer without a home, a man haunted by a past he couldn't escape. His name was unknown, his origins a mystery. All that was certain was that he carried a heavy burden, a weight that seemed to weigh him down like chains. He had come to this forsaken place seeking solace, a chance to escape the demons that chased him. But the asteroid belt was a harsh mistress, and it offered no respite. The drifter stumbled into the dusty main street of the asteroid's only town, a ramshackle collection of buildings huddled together for warmth. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and sweat, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the streets. He ducked into a dimly lit saloon, the only place in town that offered a semblance of shelter. Inside, the saloon was packed with rough-looking characters. A grizzled old man sat at the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey, his eyes fixed on the door. A group of rowdy miners played cards at a table, their laughter punctuated by the clinking of coins. In the corner, a woman in a tattered dress watched the scene with a bored expression. The drifter found an empty stool at the bar and ordered a drink. The bartender, a burly man with a scarred face, served him a shot of moonshine. The drifter took a sip, his face contorting in disgust. The moonshine was rough, but it was better than nothing. As he sat there, nursing his drink, the drifter felt a chill run down his spine. He sensed that something was wrong, something dangerous. He glanced around the saloon, his eyes scanning the faces of the patrons. Then he saw it. A figure stood in the doorway, a tall, imposing figure that seemed to cast a shadow over the entire room. The alien bounty hunter had arrived. Its skin was a mottled gray, with piercing yellow eyes that seemed to bore into the very soul of anyone who dared to meet its gaze. It had 4 arms, each ending in a set of claws that looked capable of tearing through metal. The creature wore a long, tattered coat that billowed out behind it, and a wide-brimmed hat sat low on its head, casting its face in shadow. The drifter knew that underneath that hat was a set of antennae, twitching and sensing the emotions of everyone in the room. The saloon owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, sailed over to the bounty hunter. "What brings you to our little slice of the galaxy?" she asked, her voice as smooth as the whiskey she poured. The alien's response was cold and emotionless. "The lawbreaker known as the Phantom Bandit. He has a bounty on his head, and I aim to collect." The room grew tense. The Phantom Bandit was a legend around these parts, a thief who had been preying on the mining barons and their ill-gotten gains. Some saw him as a hero, others as a nuisance, but one thing was clear. He had made powerful enemies. The Marshal, a grizzled man named Hank, stepped forward. "I've got a bone to pick with that outlaw, too," he said, his hand hovering over his holstered blaster. "But I do things by the book around here." The alien's yellow eyes narrowed. "Your book does not concern me. The Phantom Bandit is mine." The drifter knew that he had to act fast. If the bounty hunter found the Phantom, it would only be a matter of time before the whole town was embroiled in a bloody shootout. He had to get to the outlaw first, to warn him and maybe even convince him to leave the asteroid belt for good. But could he trust the Marshal, or was Hank in cahoots with the mining barons? With a nod to Clara, the drifter slammed down his empty glass and stepped out into the storm. The wind howled around him, sand stinging his face like 1,000 tiny knives. He knew where to find the Phantom. He had left a trail of whispers and half-truths wherever he went. And if he played his cards right, he might just be able to save the outlaw's neck, or at least ensure that the bounty hunter didn't collect its prize. The drifter's boots echoed on the metal grating of the street as he headed towards the outskirts of town. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. But he had made his choice. He was going to help the Phantom, even if it meant crossing the law or the alien that had come to claim its bounty. The horizon was a swirling mass of dust and darkness, obscuring the stars above. It was a fitting backdrop for the kind of world where a man had to make a stand, even if it meant going up against the most feared hunter in the galaxy. As he walked, the Drifter checked his blaster, ensuring it was fully charged. He had a feeling he was going to need it. On the outskirts of town, the buildings grew sparse, giving way to a minefield of discarded equipment and abandoned shacks. The Phantom's hideout was rumored to be somewhere in this desolate area, and the Drifter had a hunch it was in the old miners' camp. The wind howled through the wreckage, carrying whispers of secrets and lost dreams. The Drifter approached a ramshackle shack, its wooden frame barely holding together against the relentless onslaught of the Asteroid's harsh environment. He pushed open the door, the rusty hinges screeching in protest. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and desperation. The Phantom Bandit sat in the corner, his back to the wall, a blaster in each hand. "You're not from around here," the Outlaw said, not bothering to look up. His voice was rough, like gravel being crushed underfoot. "No, I'm not," the Drifter replied, stepping into the room. "But I've heard about you. They say you've been taking from the mining barons." The Phantom finally met his gaze, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "They say a lot of things. Some of them might even be true." The Drifter decided to cut to the chase. "There's an alien bounty hunter in town, looking for you. You need to get out before it finds you." The Outlaw's smile grew wider, revealing a set of teeth that had seen better days. "And what makes you think I'm scared of it?" The Drifter shrugged. "I don't know if you're scared or not, but I know that creature won't stop until it gets what it's after. And when it does, there will be nothing left but blood and dust." The Phantom considered this for a moment, then slowly stood up, holstering his weapons. "All right, stranger. I'll take my chances with you. But know this. I don't owe you anything, and if we cross paths again, I might not be so friendly." Together, they ventured into the storm, the Phantom leading the way through the maze of abandoned structures. The wind tugged at their clothes and stung their eyes, but they pushed on, driven by the need to stay one step ahead of the bounty hunter. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, the Drifter couldn't help but feel a kinship with the Outlaw. Both were men on the run, seeking refuge from their pasts. But the Asteroid Belt was no place for camaraderie. It was a land of survival, where alliances were as fleeting as the whispers of the wind. They reached a hidden cave, the entrance barely visible amidst the swirling dust. The Phantom gestured for the Drifter to follow, and they descended into the dark, the only light coming from the glowing crystals embedded in the walls. It was a small, cramped space, but it was shelter from the storm and the aliens' pursuit. The Drifter knew their time together was limited. Soon, the bounty hunter would pick up their trail, and the chase would be on again. But for now, they had a brief respite, a chance to catch their breath before the final showdown. And as they sat in the flickering light, he wondered if the asteroid would ever grant them the peace they both sought, or if it would just be another tombstone in the vast, uncaring cosmos. The Phantom spoke first, his voice echoing in the small space. "Why are you helping me?" The Drifter took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Because I've seen what happens when power goes unchecked," he said finally. "I've seen the kind of damage those mining barons do. And if you're taking their gold, maybe you're giving some of it back to those who need it." The Outlaw's eyes searched his, as if looking for a lie. Then, with a nod, he turned away. "Maybe," he murmured, "but that's not all of it." The Drifter didn't press the issue. He knew that everyone had their reasons for the paths they walked, and perhaps, in time, the Phantom would share his. As the storm outside raged on, the two men sat in silence, listening to the echoes of their breaths and the occasional clank of metal against rock. The Phantom was restless, his eyes never staying still for long. He was a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. "You've got a plan?" the Drifter asked, breaking the silence. "I've got a ship," the Outlaw said. "It's not much, but it'll get us off this rock." The Drifter nodded. "We'll need to move fast, before the bounty hunter catches up." The Phantom's smile was grim. "Fast is my specialty." They waited for the storm to abate, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. The Phantom checked his blasters, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The Drifter could feel the same energy building within him, a familiar cocktail of fear and excitement that came before every battle. When the winds finally died down, they emerged from the cave into the cold embrace of the asteroid night. The stars had returned, a twinkling sea of light that stretched out to infinity. But the calm was deceptive, as the air was still charged with the scent of danger. They made their way through the outskirts of town, sticking to the shadows. The Drifter's senses were on high alert, every noise a potential threat. They approached the Phantom's ship, a sleek, black vessel that looked out of place among the rusty hulks that littered the area. "This is it," the Outlaw whispered. "Get in, and I'll take you to the edge of the asteroid belt. From there, you're on your own." The Drifter nodded, his hand on the hatch. "I'll keep an eye out for you," he said. The Phantom clapped him on the shoulder. "And I'll keep an eye out for you, too." They climbed aboard, the engines coming to life with a low rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. The ship took off, rising into the night sky like a bat escaping its cave. As they soared into the inky blackness, the Drifter couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. He had made a friend in the most unlikely of places, and now he was leaving him behind. But he knew that the asteroid belt was no place for friendship. It was a place for survival, for those who could endure the harshness of the void. And as they disappeared into the stars, he hoped that the Phantom's rebellion would be the spark that lit the fire of change. The Drifter watched the asteroid shrink in the distance, the saloon's lights winking out like distant stars. The bounty hunter was still out there, and he had a score to settle. But for now, the Drifter was free, the wind of the cosmos in his hair and the promise of adventure in his heart. He was a solitary figure, a knight-errant in the vast, uncharted expanse of space. And he would ride on, ever searching for the peace that eluded him. The Phantom ship was fast, but it was old and temperamental. The Drifter lent a hand with the controls, his years of experience in the asteroid belt serving them well as they dodged chunks of space debris and the ever-watchful eyes of the mining barons' patrols. They didn't speak much during the flight, each lost in their own thoughts, their own battles. As they approached the edge of the asteroid belt, the Phantom turned to him. "This is as far as I can take you," he said, his voice tight with tension. "The bounty hunter's bound to have friends out here." The Drifter nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the asteroids gave way to the vastness of the galaxy. "I understand," he said. "I've got a feeling our paths will cross again." The Phantom handed him a data chip. "Take this," he said. "It's got the locations of a few of the mining baron stashes. Maybe it'll help you keep the peace out here." The Drifter took the chip, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I'll make sure it's put to good use." The ship dropped the Drifter off on a lonely asteroid, nothing but rocks and dust as far as the eye could see. He watched the ship disappear into the black, feeling a strange mix of relief and loneliness. He was on his own again, but with a new purpose. He set out on foot, the asteroid's low gravity making his steps feel like leaps. His destination was the asteroid they had just left, which had been one of the Phantom's targets. The miners were a hardy bunch, but they had been pushed to their limits by the greedy barons. They needed someone to stand up for them, to show them that there was still justice in the stars. The outpost was a hive of activity, lights flickering in the darkness. The Drifter approached with caution, his blaster at the ready. He had a plan, one that would test his skills and his resolve. But as he drew closer, he heard the unmistakable sound of a fight, blasters firing and shouts echoing through the canyons. The Marshal was there, his badge glinting in the artificial light, surrounded by a group of thugs in the employ of the mining barons. They had cornered a young girl, her eyes wide with fear. The Drifter knew that look all too well. It was the look of someone who had nowhere left to run. Without hesitation, he drew his weapon and charged into the fray. The air was filled with the scent of ozone as blasts flew past his head. The Marshal looked up, surprise etched on his weathered features, but he didn't miss a beat. Together, they fought back the Baron's men, their blasters singing a tune of rebellion. When the dust settled, The drifter looked at Hank. "Looks like we're on the same side after all," he said, extending a hand. The Marshal took it, a grin spreading across his face. "Welcome to the fight, partner," he said. "We got a long road ahead of us." And so, the drifter's journey continued, now with a new ally by his side. They would face danger, uncover secrets, and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to tame the wild asteroid belt. The story of the Phantom Bandit and the mysterious drifter grew with every passing day, a tale of justice and camaraderie in the most unlikely of places. But the alien bounty hunter was not one to be easily deterred. It would not rest until it had claimed its prize, and its sights were now set on the drifter. The hunt was on, and the asteroid belt would never be the same again. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories. Give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.